First Finance Club meeting. Guest lecturer Chris Worthington from AXA Advisors and Action.
All right, hi everyone, welcome to the Finance Club meeting. I'm the president, Elizabeth Jerome. We present Chris Worthington. He's going to introduce himself and talk about AXA Advisors and the opportunities there, as well as how imperative the SIE test is and how that coordinates with AXA Advisors. So, Chris Worthington.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Good afternoon. I haven't been videotaped in a while, so this is a first.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll go viral.
Great. I'll try not to do anything embarrassing, but thanks for having me. I just wanted to take like 10 or 15 minutes this afternoon to talk about kind of what we do at AXA, and then this externship program that we're putting on where we'll be coming to St. Mary's, and it's a couple hours. It's 3 separate programs, each probably an hour and a half to 2 hours, but we just talk about kind of the industry from a macro perspective, then kind of our onboarding process and our financial planning process. So a bit about myself. I grew up in Orinda, right around the corner, graduated from Miramani in 2011, went to University of Colorado, and then after graduation came on board at AXA, and we are financial advisors, really sitting down with families and small businesses, helping them plan kind of for the future and plan for all their financial needs. Funny enough, my dad actually grew up with Larry Souza, and they knew each other in the 80s. So that's kind of how I got connected here, and I'm here today. So a bit about, I guess, I wanted to talk more about this externship program and kind of what we cover. So we start off with kind of from a macro level, looking at the whole financial services industry as well as the economy, talking about the presidency, the Brexit, the China trade war, really what's going on in the global economy as well as the U.S. economy. Then we transition to kind of the difference between what a financial analyst is compared to what a financial advisor is. Because a lot of people just couple it into one thing and just say, I want to work in finance. Well, that's a pretty broad, claim to make or statement to make, because the analyst is the individual that's enjoys, sitting behind a computer, working with Excel, analyzing spreadsheets, analyzing, different stocks, bonds, mutual funds. Where the advisor is more the sales, more integrated in sales, and you're out there meeting with individuals, like I mentioned, helping them with their financial plan, and really setting them up for the analyst to help them with their choices of different stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. Any questions kind of on that topic? Okay. Then we go into kind of our licensing process and the different licenses that are required for the different fields. For example, we require the Life, Accident, Health, SIE, Series 7 and Series 66. So the SIE is something that you need if you want to go into any field of financial services. So that's whether you want to be the analyst or the advisor. And that's the class that Dr. Souza puts on. And where is it? Yeah, I guess I actually didn't have to take this course because it's new, but I'm sure it's interesting stuff. So sign up for it. I mean, you really need it if you want to go into finance, or it's really will build up your resume whether you decide to go into it or not, which I think is important. And you can learn from Dr. Souza. A lot of what I've been hearing is that he talks about real life stuff in his classes. I remember going to class and learning about economics and all this math that I don't even really remember too much about anymore, but I've heard that you really get into a lot of real world stuff that's applicable after you graduate. Then we go into our onboarding process, what a typical day looks like to be a financial advisor, and what a typical week and month looks like, how you spread it out between training and prospecting, running appointments. I would say prospecting and running appointments are the two most important aspects of the business. We've got a few different avenues, whether it be going to networking events, working with your warm market, doing some cold calling, is a lot of how we're getting in front of these individuals. From there, we talk about our platform and go pretty extensively into our platform. A bit about AXA is really when you think of financial services, I like to paint the picture of two different ends of the spectrum. One is the Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley type companies where they want to manage your investment accounts, manage your 401k, IRA, brokerage accounts. The other end of the spectrum are the Northwestern Mutual, New York Life type companies where they want to offer permanent life insurance as well as some annuities. AXA falls right in the middle, so we call ourselves holistic financial planners and really kind of making everything work as one and kind of make everything correlate. From there, you get a certificate, so just kind of like a stamp of approval that you went through the course. You can put it on your resume. And then we typically offer 2 to 3 jobs for students that have already graduated and 1 to 2 internships for the next either summer or fall. So that's really everything I wanted to go over. Just kind of wanted to introduce that course. I'll have a sign-in sheet where you can give me your email and contact information, and I'll email more information about what dates we're thinking and kind of go from there. Now, I'd like to open up to any questions that you guys have. I threw a lot at you. Yeah.
So for summer internships, do you require the SIE, or is that something that would be required for
No.
a job position?
Not required. It's preferred, but definitely not required. Yeah. Any other questions?
Can you walk us through the, like the hiring process, and for full-time positions and
Yeah.
interviewing for the internships and how long they last and
Yeah.
what are we doing and all the fun stuff?
So we've hired a few people. One intern, Jake, I forget his last name, and then Tyler Ocampo are 2 people that we've hired through this program. The onboarding process or the interview process is it's a bit different if you go through this course, this externship program, because at the end of it, we just have one final interview with our EVP, George Shamus, where he, 45 minutes, hour long, and he just kind of talks to you and makes sure it's the right fit for you. For the internships, it's a regular 6 to 8 weeks, either in the summer or the fall. And what you're doing is really just shadowing and supporting the financial advisors around the office. So, creating different spreadsheets, shadowing them on appointments, going to all the trainings. A lot of what the interns do is start studying for either the SIE or the Series 7, so they can kind of have a head start once they do graduate. Yeah.
Where are your offices located?
So we've got,
Specifically, where the Walnut Creek or SF?
yeah, we've got one in Walnut Creek and one in SF, and then one up in Sacramento. So I'm out of the San Francisco office, and it doesn't really matter necessarily where you are located or which office you work out of. Basically, we have everyone come into our SF office on Mondays because that's our main office where we do all of our district meetings and all of our trainings. And then the other days you're kind of working out of either the Walnut Creek office or the San Francisco office and running appointments or going down to the South Bay to run appointments.
And how many hours a week is this internship? 30, 40?
It's pretty flexible. Everything's pretty flexible when you start and when you stop. But typically it's 30 to 40 hours a week.
Can you walk us through the exam requirements to become an advisor?
Yes.
How long it usually takes? And
So the life accident health is pretty straightforward. That takes about 2 weeks. The SIE depends if you're, how focused you are, if you're in school or not. If you're out of school, it probably takes 3 or so weeks. And then the Series 7 and Series 66 probably take a month each. But we started a new program. We're actually having the new people come in and start going to the trainings and start prospecting while they're studying. So it just kind of gets them moving a little quicker, once they do pass the test. But yeah, it's kind of it's an annoying process, but something that everyone goes through. I did it while I was working, like 50 hours a week, and I would go and study in the evenings and study on the weekends, and it was pretty brutal, but got through it. What else?
Can you tell us how you got to AXA Advisors?
Yeah, so I graduated in 2015 and then didn't really know what I wanted to do. My dad was the vice president or the EVP of our San Francisco office, so I knew that this was an opportunity. But I wanted to pave my own path or try to do something different. So I went and got a job at a recruiting agency. They said it was salary plus commission. It was like $40,000 was my salary, and commission, I think I ended up making like $45,000 my first year, and I was working pretty hard, felt that I was doing pretty well. So after about a year of doing that, I transitioned and joined my dad, and my brother actually works here as well, and my cousin as well. So there's a bunch of us now. And then all of our friends. So there's like 20 of us. But transitioned and worked there for a year, did pretty well my first year, and then got asked to become a manager starting off my second year, and then now have a team of 10. And it's definitely a lot, and I've got a lot on my plate, but it's really fun to see kind of people progress and start to do well. I guess something funny, when I first started, I was completely money motivated, and I wanted to make more money than my brother and all of our friends and everyone else. But after a while, I realized the impact that you can actually have on these different families, because there's so many people that just work their 9-to-5 job and don't really plan for the future. And I think that you can really have a large impact on their retirement or their kids' education planning, or loss of life if you help them with life insurance. I actually had someone that I set up a life insurance policy for. They were completely healthy. They ended up passing away, and I got a letter from the wife that told me how grateful they were that we set them up for the policy, because they were going through the toughest time in their life and didn't know what they would do if they didn't have that extra money. So it made me really switch from being money motivated to seeing how many different families I can help and impact. And then you make more money, obviously, the more families that you help set up. Yeah.
Can you run us through a day-to-day, your operations as a manager working there?
Can I do for a typical advisor? Because it's a little more complicated for a manager. So we set it into a 4-year kind of, we call it DSF, Developing Sales Force is what you are. And that's really where you're going through extensive training and shadowing and being mentored. And then after your 4th year, we typically see people either leave the business or really kind of take off and can start doing things more on their own. So those first 4 years, you're going to training Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 10 to 12. And then in the mornings, you typically are doing paperwork, calling the back office, trying to push pieces of business through. And then Tuesday, Wednesday afternoon, Thursday, and Friday afternoon, you're really either prospecting or running appointments. So it's nice because you're not tied to a desk. You're really out either in the South Bay or in the Peninsula in the North Bay, meeting with families or going to networking events, cold calling, running reviews with clients that you already have. So I'm kind of at the point in my business where I'm done cold calling and done, building a decent amount of clients, that now I'm just running reviews and then asking for referrals, asking for friends and family, see if I can, help them out with the financial plan. So I'd say that's a typical day. I guess a week, you probably run 10 to 15 appointments that are each an hour long. And then besides that, you're just prospecting and training. Yeah.
So is this externship program, is this new? Like you didn't go through this process?
I haven't at St. Mary's. I've gone through it we've done it at Chico and USF and SF State. And it always, we typically start off with 20 to 25 students, and then the second one there'll be 15 because some people drop off because they're not interested. And we end with between 8 and 10. And then from that, depending on kind of the different individuals in it, we'll select 2 to 3 full-time for a job opportunity, and then 1 to 2 internships. Yeah. Does this fall in line with what most of you are looking for? What are you guys typically, what type of internships and full-time opportunities are you guys looking for?
Well, personally, I'm a junior and I was looking for a summer internship in the
Nice.
field of finance, and so it sounds like something that's very interesting to me, so I'm looking forward to that opportunity.
Yeah, perfect. What about you guys? What are you guys looking for?
Yeah, we can shadow and learn a lot, so that's actually perfect what I'm looking for.
Are you a junior as well?
Senior.
Nice. Cool. What else do you guys have? Yeah?
Two different questions. One is, do you require Series 6 and 7, or just one of the two?
7 and 66 are the
Okay.
2 licenses,
So
so,
you don't need Series 6 then?
no, not the Series 6.
Okay.
So this, yeah, go ahead.
And then the other one was just about, when you're helping people decide what to invest in, how do you do that? Is there an asset allocation procedure, and then what types of investments do you have people in?
Yeah, that's definitely a complex question. It really depends on their situation and what their needs are. Whether we really sit down and go through an extensive, I guess the process is we do a first meeting where we introduce our platform and a few of our financial planning tools. Then we go back for a second meeting, it's called our fact-finding meeting, where we get an understanding of what their short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals and priorities are, as well as what their monthly expenses are, and then what they're doing currently financially, where their money's allocated, if they're maxing out their 401k, if they've got rental income, what their different, create a whole big picture. And then we do a risk tolerance questionnaire that breaks down how much risk, in their eyes they should be taking. And then we can go to we've got a huge platform of different investment options. A lot of what we've been doing recently is looking at individuals' portfolios and seeing kind of how they've performed over the last 5 and 10 years, and then looking at how they've performed over the last year. And a lot of them over the last 5 and 10 years won't have kept pace with the S&P or the Russell. And then in the last year they'll have lost more, which is kind of the inverse of what you want. You obviously want to be making more than the S&P when the market's going up, and not losing as much when it's going down. So a lot of what we've been recommending recently is downside protection, where you can't lose any money if it goes down, but full market participation if it goes up, and it's 0 fee. So it really depends on their situation, but I would say that's one of our most used options at the moment.
How does that work with 0 fee?
It's pretty complicated, but they buy a 0 coupon bond that matures at par. So say someone has $100,000, they'll take $90,000 and buy a 0 coupon bond that matures at $100,000. And then with the other $10,000, I get paid, the AXA takes their portion, and then they buy call options and put options with the other $7,000 or $8,000. So they don't really care if the market's up or down over that time span. Because if it's up, their call options will hit. If it's down, the put options will. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. So that's what you're really learning the first, couple months and through the internship process.
And when hiring, like the internship process or just like the job process, like what are you guys looking for? What
Really, what it comes down to is someone that's hardworking, personable, and able to connect with people and build trust, because it's the whole, to be successful, you have to build trust. And, you know, it's definitely challenging when you're 22, 23 years old. I definitely, my younger brother looks like he's like 16 years old. He's 25. So he had a huge concern that no one would trust him or take him seriously because he looks so young. But his first few years, he ran all of his meetings jointly with my dad or one of the other managers. And then now he's at the point where he knows that his knowledge is 100 times more than the person that he's sitting across from the desk talking with. So he's really confident in his process and what we have to offer. So he just speaks with conviction. But I would say trust and being willing to work hard.
What's the ratio of financial analysts to financial advisors at AXA?
I'm not really sure. Our analysts are on the East Coast, so
Oh, okay.
they're,
So this
And-
internship is for advisors?
yeah, so they're in Charlotte. Our office is all advisors, and then we have analysts that you can reach out to and speak with if you have questions or need advice.
Do they do hiring separately?
Yeah,
But it does help you get in, go through the process,
yeah,
and then make that transition.
yeah, certainly.
Do you have like any suggestions on like how to succeed in that a potential internship or job? Or like what has helped you succeed in your career?
I would just say, determination. It's, there's a lot of, my first year, if you ask anyone in our office, it was like, it was a roller coaster of emotions, because I would get really up when things were going well, and then fully panic when things were not going well, and when, I didn't have any business coming in. But I knew if I was booking 10 to 15 meetings each week, that it would come to, fruition, and everything that I would hit all the goals that I had. So I would just say being determined and, not panicking.
Did you guys also have a manager track at some point? I mean, if you perform or you build a company or something?
Yeah, so it's kind of similar to my situation. If they like to pick people in their third and fourth years that have shown leadership, have worked hard and have done well, they ask them to join the management team. And that really just entails, making override on all of the people that you hire and bring in. So typically, it was after, I guess the whole program is first you're an advisor, and then if you get tapped on the shoulder and asked to join the management track, you're a PDM, prospective district manager, for a year, where they teach you kind of how to manage, what the expectations are, and then after about a year, 18 months, they promote you to a district manager. So that's kind of the process.
And then what do you hire your own teams and run off the platform in any office that you want? Or how's-
Yep, and then you're just developing your team, running meetings for them, making sure that they're successful. Yeah, I guess, and then after becoming a manager, you can there's a few different routes. One is going back into production, going back and just working with families and, doing your individual thing, or going and becoming a VP and either a senior vice president or an executive vice president. And that's when you're running the whole branch. So those are really the two different routes. Anything else?
Why don't you give us some of the questions that you would ask a prospect, and then how do you overcome objections? I always loved objections.
So someone that I'm trying
'Cause
to...
everybody, I don't know about you guys, maybe you guys will get into it, nobody will object to you, and they'll buy everything you recommend.
I get a lot
Yeah,
of...
that would be awesome.
That would be nice. No, I mean, if you're cold calling people, the main one is just, I'm not interested, I already have an advisor, I don't have the time, you know, typical stuff like that, just trying to get you off the phone, and, because no one really likes being cold called. I know, I get cold called sometimes and I say the exact same stuff. Kind of overcoming the objections, saying, you know, someone says you're not interested, just go, I understand, I only spoke, like, gave you a 1-minute pitch. If you have 10 to 15 minutes of your time, I can go into more detail of how we've helped other individuals and kind of go through our platform, something like that. For people that say I'm already working with an advisor, I typically just say, completely understand, this is a no-cost introduction, and oftentimes, you know, we've got unique strategies or downside protection strategies that not a lot of people are familiar with. So just kind of trying to say you understand, and then say, why not take 10 to 15 minutes to hear what I have to say? Won't cost you anything.
Is The Wolf of Wall Street your favorite movie?
I enjoy that movie. I don't know if it's my favorite movie,
That's what it
but
sounds like to me.
yeah.
So what kind of questions are you asking the clients when you talk to them? I mean, there's soft selling. I like to sell without selling.
Yeah.
When I'm prospecting and talking to clients to kind of qualify them and to figure out what types of products or strategies would be appropriate for them.
I mean, I think I'm pretty open with them and telling them just that to go through this process, we need to get an understanding of what your needs will be, if it's liquidity, tax mitigation, if they need to purchase a home in the next few years, education planning is on the horizon, they need to put a new roof, if they need money for liquid purposes. And then once I get an understanding of what they think their needs are, then I come back and create our financial plan and go and present that financial plan, and then I'll give a solution of something that I recommend. And if I get to that point, it typically goes pretty well. You know, if someone's willing to meet with you 3 or 4 times and listen to your recommendation, I mean, all of our recommendations I think are extremely reasonable, cost-wise, and betters pretty much everyone's situation. So I'm pretty honest with them and just tell them why I think this is good for their situation, and then let them decide if they want to move forward or not.
Then what about like compensation? I mean, what are like the splits and
Yeah.
commissions that you make on some of the products?
I can go through a case that was actually my largest case. So I sat down and met with this couple. They were 65 years old, and they had, this was in my first year, they were 65 years old, and their 3 main objectives were having a steady stream of income in retirement. So they had $2 million of cash or in different investments. So they had $2 million of investable assets, and their goals were having a steady stream of income, then having insurance or long-term care. If they passed away, they wanted to leave money for their children, and then they wanted some extra money for vacations. He liked to buy Harleys, so he wanted to, I don't know, I think he had a few different motorcycles. So what I set him up with was, first off, we put $1 million in one of our variable annuity products that peels off 5% per, it's guaranteed 5% per year. So we put $1 million in that because their fixed expenses were $50,000 a year. So that guaranteed that they'd be able to pay their mortgage, pay their car bill and whatnot. The second portion was we did 500K and 500K into a permanent life insurance policy that if they passed away, it also had a long-term care rider on it. So if they ever went into long-term care, it's a bit complicated, and I won't get too far into it right now, but you can start taking money out of that death benefit before you pass away. Because essentially the government saw that these elderly folks would have life insurance policies that once they passed away, their kids would get a large lump sum, but they would go into a long-term care event and they would draw down all their assets, or their kids would have to pay for their long-term care. And then, so the kids would have to pull money out of their IRAs, do all this stuff to make sure their parents were living comfortably. And they figured this would just allow them to pull out money without having to dig into their assets. So that's with long-term care. And then the last piece was we put $1 million into a managed investment account that was, would grow, but they could pull money out if they needed to go on vacation, wanted to go, pay for their grandchildren's birthday present or whatever, or whatnot. So how this works, how you get compensated, you make, on this $1 million, you make 3.25% of the 1 million. So I think, yeah, good math, that's 32,500 production credits is what I made off that. And then we have a bonus. So I made 1.3 of 32,500. I think it, let's call it 40K. From this portion, you get 55% of each premium that they pay. So they were paying $10,000 a year into each of these. So I made, call it 11,000 PCs off this portion. Multiply that by 1.3, call it 14,000. And then on this, you get paid 1% per year, and then AXA takes half. So I make, I think that's 5K per year off this account. And then if you grow that to 2 million, then you get 1%, or half, I guess half a percent each year, depending on what the value is. That make sense? Yeah.
When you call them production credits, what does that mean exactly? Is that income?
It's just our way of measuring how much you make off of it, and then that bonus is the multiplier that you end up getting paid off.
That's actual income to you as the agent?
Yeah. So that's what so off this case I made like $60,000 in my first year. So it was my biggest case, and I haven't done anything close to that since. But a lot goes into it. I had to work with them for 6 months because they interviewed 3 different financial advisors. They made sure that I was the one that they wanted to work with, and then the whole process took multiple months. But it was obviously worth it, in the end.
And then how is the income distributed? Is it 1099 or?
Your W-2 your first 4 years, and then your 1099 after that. It's a lot more complicated than that, because once you're through your first 4 years, your bonus gets a lot higher than 1.3. So it's typically 1.5 or 1.6. But your 1099, so you can write off all your business expenses. And I just went through taxes, and it saved me. I was going to owe like $25,000 in taxes, but I was able to write it off for various business expenses. So yeah.
That's only one case.
I know.
Do fine.
The average case is like, I would say 5,000 PCs, it's like $7,000, something around there. And I probably get like 15 to 20 clients a year. What else? All right. Yeah.
Sorry for all the.
No, I like it.
As far as the investment products that you're using, are those all AXA, or do you also have outside mutual funds or
Yeah.
ETFs or whatever?
Good question. So we're a broker-dealer, so we do offer AXA products, but we also offer hundreds of different companies. We offer every different insurance company, so that's valuable if they're going through underwriting, if they want to pay less in premiums. And then for our investments, we work with all the large ones, Fidelity, DFA, BlackRock, American funds. And so that's a lot of what our pitch is that we're non-biased. We get compensated the same whether we place the business through AXA or through another company. Yeah. You need a car, you need to do some financial planning.
I'm a little bit of a ringer, I've been a financial planner, so.
All right. Well, I will leave this sign-up sheet up here, as well as I've got a few business cards. If you guys are interested in that externship, I'll come out here. It's 3 weeks in a row. So I'll come out here for the first 2 sessions, and then the third is in our office maybe I'll do it in Walnut Creek, but typically in San Francisco. And we'll bring pizza, and after the third one, we'll go out and get some beers. Yeah, so I'll leave that for whoever is interested.
Great.
Yeah.
And thanks for the sponsorship on the SIE.
Yeah, appreciate you doing the class.
Yeah, no problem. I think we already had 2, Austin Chow and Sam Carlson, they already passed it. And hopefully we'll get some more people motivated to sign up and pass it, because it's just it's an awesome opportunity, and you're almost guaranteed a job if you pass it.
Yeah, it's not that hard. I've had a few people pass it, so I passed it.
You passed the Series
Yeah.
24, which is hard.
which is way harder.
All
Cool.
right, excellent.
Anything else you wanna?
No, I think that's it. Oh, you might want to mention about the event.
I just wanted to get away from the camera.
Okay.
Camera shy.
That's okay. It's gonna go viral once I post this thing.
What else